when someone is using your website, you may want to keep track of certain information about the user. So for example, you might want to keep track of their name, their email, their password. You might want to keep track of their shopping cart, what items they have in it, how much money it's going to cost them. If your website's a game, you might want to keep track of their character, their accounts, their character name. There's all these things that you want to keep track of. In other words, you want to save a reference to these things. So JavaScript lets us do that through the use of variables. Now variables, let's keep it really simple. To create a variable, you can use one of two keywords. You can use the let keyword. Then you give your variable a name. So let's say I want to keep track of the user's account name. And I wouldn't necessarily know their account name, but let's pretend I do. And let's say their account name is, I don't know, I'll use my YouTube account, whatever. So this line of code, I have created a variable with the name account name. And this variable is storing this string data. So it's storing this information. So I can access this information through the variable name. I always say variables are like a box you put things in. So here I've got a box and it's storing the value of room 212. If you're new with variables, couple things to note. Variables always start with a lowercase name because programmers are finicky and they'll get mad if you don't do that. However, if you had a long variable name, like let's say time of day, having every letter lowercase can be a bit tough on the eyes. So what we do is we call it camel case, which means our first letter, our first word starts with the lowercase. But if we're mashing a bunch of words together, we uppercase the first letter of each subsequent word. So this would be a perfectly named variable. Sometimes your variables just have easy names and you don't have to worry about that. But just make sure that they are lowercase. All right. So how do you use variables? Well, we learned that I can display messages in the console. So what happens if I slap my variable inside a console log message? Well, if I fire up my website, Control-Shift-J to open up my console, you can see that the console spits out the value of the variable. So I didn't have to type in room 212 here. All I needed to do was use the variable name, and the variable name is storing the value that I'm interested in. So this is a string variable because it's just a bunch of words and letters. So we use these quotations. You could create numeric variables. So you could say let passcode. Let's say account passcode. Let's say they have a passcode, and it's a set of numbers. So let's say it's, I don't know, 2112. I like that passcode. Notice the difference. When you make variables for words and letters, you use quotations. When you make variables for numbers, you just punch the numbers in as they are. And if I was interested in finding what that account password was later on in my code, I could let myself know through the console. Passcode. And sure enough, 2112 pops up in my console. Let's just really simplify it quickly. Let's just do some math. So if you have variables with numbers, so for example, I have a variable x and it's going to hold the value of 5. Actually, let's use practical examples. Let's say I have a variable named quantity. I've got a website where people can come and buy things. And I've got another variable called cost. So they're on my website, and let's say something costs $20. So I'm going to put a cost right there. Let's say my user is buying 3 of these things. So quantity means how much, so they're going to buy 3 of this item. Let's make the numbers really stupid so that we can't do mental math. 1234, there we go. Actually, that's pretty simple. Doesn't matter. What I could do is I could create a third variable and call it total. So the total represents how much money they're going to have to pay me. I could say this variable is going to be equal to the value of the cost times the quantity. And we use that little symbol, which is a Shift 8 on your keyboard, to represent multiplication. So the total price they are paying for me, they have to pay, is how much the item cost and how many of the item they're buying. And if I was interested in learning what that total was, I could let myself know to the console. So I could use the variable name, total, which is holding the cost times the quantity. And if I fire up my website, I can see that it's 58.01, well, rounded up to 2. I'll show you rounding later, but that's fine for now. So you can see how variables work. You give your variable a name. You give your variable a value to hold. If they're number variables, you can do math with the variables. And if you're interested in finding out what that variable is equal to, you can always display the value to the console. So that's a quick little rundown on how variables work.